Welcome to Made in Italy, and welcome to another set of interviews with Italians who have made a difference around the world. As you know, for the last couple of years, we are interviewing people who have done incredible things in the academia and the arts, and also in the business world. And today we have the great pleasure to have two Italians who are working in Canada, Professor Cristiana Zaccagnino and Professor Fabio Polidicchi, who will speak to us technology and their contribution to this field. Both Professor Zaccagnino and Professor Polidicchi are actually professors at the University of Queen's University in Canada, and they have done their studies at the university in Florence and Perugia. So I would like to welcome you, and let's hear what they have to say about their expertise in the field of archaeology.
Professor Zaccagnino and Professor Polidicchi have written extensively. Today, they're going to give a new meaning to our title, Made in Italy, the title of our course, Made in Italy. So they're going to bring us back to the very moment in which the word Italy was coined. You're getting ready to dig again, and you're going to do this in Italy, in Sardegna Cristiana, if I remember correctly, and Fabio, you are going to dig in Tuscany or Lazio. Can you?
Lazio, but not for this year. It's going to happen soon, though.
Soon. Okay. Well, can you talk to us about these new projects? And also, can you help us understand how ancient Italy, which you're helping us to rediscover, contributes to our thinking of modern Italy today?
Okay, if I may start, I think that looking at our past helps us to understand better who we are today. And even though sometimes we don't think about sayings we have or uses we have, all of them are, or many of them are rooted in our ancient past. And is always very interesting to see how this happened and to give a voice to our ancestors. And is a way to give them again a life. And trying to understand what they did and why they did something. And so always a day on an excavation is different because you don't know what you are going to uncover, and is always very exciting for us and also for the students who join our projects.
Okay, well, I may just add that, that there are many dimensions to many sides to the field work of an archaeologist, and also the lot of work which is done afterwards and before in preparation and in processing. I would say that I'm one of those who think that basically the past doesn't exist without us. So it's not about studying something which is different other than you and discovering something uncovered. It's about discovering something more about yourself that you don't know yet, or it's not that clear. So the exercise of conceptualizing the past, seeing them from our point of view, is a healthy exercise of giving a little bit of distance to ourselves to think about why we do things the way we do today, how we got to be what we are, and when it's about in a modern country and its ancient past, Italy and the archaeology of Italy, of course, they are not the same. The past of Italy is not the same thing as the Italian present, but they are very much interconnected. And as you study one, you also study the other. So you basically cannot dig deeper into the Italian past without changing your way of thinking of modern Italy. They are so much interconnected, and they have always been in Italian history. Our ancestors have always been with us, playing some active role. Okay, so for my most current project, I have been working on several areas of Italy, in the south and in central Italy mostly. What we are studying, the focus on the investigation, of course, when you dig, you find all times of Italy. It's from the vineyard of 100 years ago, all the way back to the Etruscans and even before them. But that project is mostly about how a mosaic of different communities which have a very local outlook and they feel very strongly about their own community identity and traditions and religion and language and social structure and social interactions, how they come together into something larger, how this is done, basically the birth of what we call the Roman Empire, how those who used to be Etruscans end up being Romans, and how they can be both things at the same time for a very long time, because the Roman Empire wasn't like more modern empires that we may think about, because it was built mostly on a plurality of voices with, a switch between roles, identities, ways of thinking of yourself based on what they were doing, basically, where they were. The Etruscans of Caere at a certain point became Romans. But what did it mean to them in real life? How did they think of themselves? Did they really have to change that much about their own self-view, their self-understanding? And did they contribute to what Romans were? The Romans that came out of this process of aggregation of so many different groups weren't the Romans of Rome, were a much larger group. So each group brought something and changed the end result. So we are studying, starting from the very basic things of life, the food that they eat, how they cook, what language they use to carve their dedications on the vessels they live in the sanctuaries, what gods they worship, how they relate to each other, what kind of settlement pattern they have, how they build their cities, all the way up to the big thing, who you are in the larger Mediterranean world. You are an Etruscan, you are a Roman, you are part of something bigger. So basically it's a complicated work with a lot of angles and it does have a lot of reflections on what is happening today, because even today we live in a world in which there are shifting identities and power structures. There are still individuals and families and small communities, and then you go all the way up to nations and something even larger than nations. You have worldwide phenomena and interactions and forces which condition the life of billions of people. So how do all of those things come together? Well, if you see how the Romans did it, perhaps we can get a better idea of what is going on today.
In my research, I also focus a lot on images, which are on works of art, but also on coins, for example. And I study what meaning these images had for the people who produced them. Because also we have to think that the idea of art as something we enjoy is a very modern concept. In ancient time, images, even though they were beautiful and they were able to recognize that a work of art was very well made and beautiful, but they were meant to give a message to the ones who were looking at them. So in my case, along with excavations, also I dig in museums, going there and studying artifacts which have been uncovered by colleagues and sometimes archaeologists of a long time ago. I mean, last century, but also the 19th century, for example, and so on. And I study these monuments, also looking at the techniques were used to produce them. So especially in the last years, I studied a lot the polychromy of monuments, because we have this idea of ancient monuments white, the color of the marble, but they were really full of colors. They were not white. They were painted with bright colors. And so also to find these traces and then reimagine a monument in a different aspect is extremely interesting, and also is a way for me to communicate this and to share this knowledge with others.
Thank you very much.
So for the statues, I mean, for my research, Roman statues. The period is the before Christ, and also the early centuries of the Roman Empire, so after Christ. And instead, when I'm going to excavate in Sardinia, a beautiful island of Italy, there I'm going to work on three different civilizations, because it's an island where Phoenicians and then Punic people went, but also Romans. So there is a mix of cultures, which is also something we can experience frequently studying the ancient past of Italy.
Well, one of I think the strong points of the archaeological approach to history is that you start seeing history, well, being in the shoes of the ancient people in their everyday life. How, nations, empires, great geopolitical constructions are made. Well, most of the times, you cannot do it effectively using, large, big general concepts and ideas and principles. It's about everyday life. It needs to be tangible. It needs to be something that you can see, you can easily understand, you can easily experience. What does it mean to be Etruscan or Roman or Italian or today Florentine versus or a Roman or a Sicilian? What does it actually mean? Other than some large concepts which are kind of abstract. And most of the times it's about things you do in your everyday life, your experiences that make you and make you what you are. And most of the times it's about stuff like food, for instance, or drink, what you drink and what you eat and how. For instance, one research line that I've had for a few years has been about Greek settlers coming to South Italy. This is a big chapter of Italian history, and the local populations basically coming in contact with each other, having to interact with each other for the good, for the bad, and how do they coexist? How do they find a way to make the most of both of them being there? How do they speak to each other? Well, they speak a different language, but how do you make bridges between different people? Well, I found, for instance, that a very big role was drinking wine together. And how? The Greeks came with their developing but already well-established tradition of the symposium, of the drinking together, a social way of drinking which made communality, which made solidarity between people, even the idea of equality, very tangible, very visible. They were sociable together, following a set of rules. There was a symposium etiquette, things you were supposed to do or not to do, contribute to the success of the event. They came with these very strong traditions. And they also had their own way of making wine. So it tasted in a certain way. The local Italians instead had a different way of making wine. We know that because of several analysis made on the seeds of grapes, for instance, and the residues of wine found in ancient vases. And also, we know that they drank it in a different way. We know that because they used different cups and other vessels to prepare it. The Greeks mixed their wine with water. The local Italians didn't. So they have two different wine traditions and two different traditions in wine consumption. And then they find a sort of middle ground where they both keep something from the other. And if you think about it, if you want to make friends, get to know people whom you don't know, what do? Well, you have a meal together or a good drink together. Also think of the effect of wine in terms of putting people in a good, relaxed mood. So after all, rather than big ideas of community and communality and intercultural exchange and stuff like that, well, it becomes much more tangible and effective if it's an invitation for a drinking party.
So can we say that if we put water in our wine, we owe this to the Greeks?
Well, probably yes. And, still in Italy, in several areas, so there is this tradition of drinking a very diluted form of wine, which is given even to children as something refreshing and an everyday drink, something simple and genuine, rather than going for pops and other stuff.
Okay, so there were different peoples who inhabited Italy in the ancient past. Of course, the Romans are the most known, but there were also Etruscans. There were also other native peoples of Italy, like, for example, Messapians and so on. But interesting is also that people from other areas at a certain point settled on the Italian peninsula. And so I mentioned it before regarding my excavation, Phoenicians, for example, but also Greeks settled in South Italy at a certain point, and also Celts dwelt in North Italy. So was a mix of different cultures and peoples who interacted with each other. So, 'Cause, 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 'cause,
Well, I would mention a couple, but I would also stress that many of these new features, new developments which arise in Italy over the centuries, over this very long period, don't really have a clear label, a clear stamp on them. More than coming from somewhere or being the great idea of somebody in particular, it's the result of their interaction with each other. And very frequently, the points of contact between groups, between social classes, are where new things happen, where novelty arises. For instance, I may mention that the Greeks came to South Italy and very early started building cities with a very clear and regular urban plan, the beginning of a certain way of building cities, of urban planning. But it doesn't exist in that same way in Greece itself at the same time. They don't come with this idea of building cities. They come to Italy, they have to build a new city from scratch in a totally different place. And there they start coming out with this idea of regular urban planning. So it's the result of a culture moving from the homeland and going somewhere else and meeting other people, and something which didn't exist in the homeland comes out. Or probably the best known contribution from abroad to ancient Italy, the alphabet, the script. Italy was not a literate country at this point because the way they lived, their economy, their social organization, it didn't require writing down things. Still, Greeks and Phoenicians, Phoenicians being originally from modern Lebanon, basically, they come with a script which is basically the same, invented in Phoenicia and adapted by the Greeks to their own language. And they introduced the Italians to this new tool, this new technique of writing. And the Italians adopted and adapted. Of course, if you take a writing system from another language and you adapt it to your own, you come out with something a little bit different because there are sounds that you don't need, or you need new signs, new symbols for sounds that you do have. So there is a little bit of reworking. From that reworking comes out the alphabet we still use, which is not the original Greek alphabet of the 8th century BCE. It's not the Phoenician. It's something which is that alphabet going between all those passages in between. And it was such an effective tool that we still use it.
You both spoke about people that were coming from other lands, other countries, and spent their life in the country that we call Italy today. And I think that this might help us reflect on what's happening in our own time, in our own years, with different groups, individuals arriving in Italy asking for asylum or asking to be welcomed in this country. What are your thoughts about this?
Okay, so from the point of view of an archaeologist studying the past of Italy, the ancient ages, well, this is a long history which has been with us starting from the very beginning of the history of Italy, and it still goes on today with different phases, phases in which Italy is a place from which people leave to go somewhere, and phases when Italy is mostly a place where people go, and anything in between. Italy has been the destination of so many individuals and groups. We have mentioned the Greeks, the Phoenicians from modern Lebanon, and the Celts, and many others. And also the Italians went a number of places in the ancient and in the modern world. Still today, of course, there are many who move to Italy from the modern countries of the East, like North Africa, like Syria, from Eastern Europe, from a number of places in the world. And it is important that both the Italians of today and the new Italians, the future Italians, those newcomers who come to bring what they are and what they know and what they can do, know that Italy has always been a destination and a point of departure, and most importantly, a place of interaction and mixing. And that is also the reason for many of the best things which came out of Italy, out of this contact, this interaction. Near the site where I dig, which is modern Cerveteri, there is the port of the city. And that port was already in the ancient past, in the 6th century BC, for instance, a very international place, a place where people from the Near East, the Phoenicians, or from North Africa, the Carthaginians, or from the Greek peninsula, the Greeks and many others, Egyptians, Iberians from Spain, you name them. They all came to trade, to exchange, to sell their services to the Etruscans, to get the merchandise from the Etruscans. And while doing that, they were sharing ideas, worldviews, and perhaps relocating there. Many of them did. We see a lot of changes in Etruscan society, which are originated by the immigration of these people. Still today, in the same place, if you visit the site today, there are a lot of people from North Africa and Syria and Eastern Europe selling and buying things at the small market which is along the beach. Those are the Italians of the future, but it's important that both Italians of today and them, these newcomers, know that that place has been the common home of Italians and foreigners for centuries, for millennia at this point.
I would like to make a final question, because our course obviously is about modern Italy. And Italy is mostly known in the world because of its heritage, right? Italy and China, they have the highest number of World Heritage by UNESCO. So what I would like to ask to you is basically, what is the relationship of Italy with its past? It is known around the world for its past, but how is the relationship, right? What for the institution, for the people? So I would like a final thought on this. Maybe we can start with Cristiana, and then we can move to Fabio.
The relationship with the past is different among Italians. So there are ones who really are very proud of the longer history of the country. And also, since, as you mentioned, according to UNESCO, there is the highest number with China of sites which are numbered in the UNESCO list. There are also in place a lot of laws which are meant to protect our heritage. And unfortunately, there are some who instead dig illegally, destroying ancient context from which we can understand our past, sometimes just for curiosity, but frequently because they want to make money out of that. But generally, and also what is typical of Italy, and I think from this interview is quite clear that Italy is made of different traditions and cultures which mingled, and still today, you know, in small things, we feel all Italians, but we have some differences. from cooking, how to pronounce, for example, a vowel. It changes in a very in a very few kilometers, no? So, and we recognize each other from these very few and little things. And I would say that is very interesting to see that even though differences, we are one country with something which really unifies we all, and in a certain way is our past.
Well, the Italian past can be used to unify and to divide because it depends on, well, the past is a flexible tool. You can make of it what you want depending on the priorities of the day. So, for instance, in politics, the interpretation of the Roman past has changed wildly based on, well, for instance, in the period after Italian unification in the South, there were several intellectuals who spoke about ancient history, but actually spoke about modern history because they pictured a terrible picture of the ancient Romans as conquerors who put an end to the beautiful and learned culture of Magna Graecia. Well, this is actually them complaining about a certain way in which Italian unification happened in the South, which made many not especially happy. Or in times much more closer to us, well, a certain party which originated from the North, it was the party of basically Roma Ladrona, Rome the thief. And they built on a sort of pseudo-Celtic heritage versus the rapacious Romans. And that was instead to express a certain discontent in some groups of the North with the central government. And interestingly enough, this is something they have dropped recently because now they have different political priorities than arguing with the government in Rome. And going to a much lower, smaller, local level, Italians choose to relate to one past rather than the other based on where they are and what they want to do. The Florentines, for instance, are especially proud of their connection with the late medieval and Renaissance period. The peak of the importance, the power, the glory of Florence. In a place like Arezzo, just a few miles away, well, of course, the Middle Age is important, but what about the Etruscans? They like to relate to the Etruscan past even better because they were independent, they were a city-state. It appeals to local pride much better than something which is larger than the city and the confines of the city. Depending on where you are, the Italians choose one past rather than the other and can switch from one to the other.
Wonderful, I must say. So, from your final thoughts, it seems that there is a deep interconnection between antiquity, right? The ancient past of Italy, modern Italy. So, my final question for you, and maybe I would like to ask Cristiana, really what are her thoughts are about the relationship between the institutions and Italy's archaeological past. What is this relationship?
So as I mentioned before, there are very strict laws about heritage, cultural heritage in Italy. And so it's not possible to everyone to dig and uncover stuff. And so there are these offices in each region of Italy and some main office in the main cities, which are in charge to control that heritage is not exploited, so there is not an illegal market of ancient artifacts excavated in Italy, but also not illegal excavations of archaeological sites. And this also involves public works, because in Italy, everywhere you are going to dig, you are going to find something. So when they are building a new palace, for example, or a new road and so on, they are going to find something. And so the works are immediately stopped until an archaeologist has verified everything, has collected everything and documented everything. So sometimes you can understand that the ones who are making these works may become upset because they are slowed down a lot, because also the way we dig, the methods we use are quite precise, and it takes time. And so for them is, of course. Is important for us because according also to our laws, everything of our ancient past belong to every one of us. So this is what the laws say. So doesn't matter if you find something in your own property, if it's under the level of the soil on which you walk, you put your feet, belongs to every one of us, is our past.
Well, I would like to thank you, both of you, Professor Zaccagnino and Professor Colivicchi, for giving us a little bit of your time for this wonderful conversation. And will be an enriching experience for our students. We are discussing the many and different and enriching aspects of Italian culture, not only in Italy, but also the contribution around the world. So thank you again very much for your time and sharing your expertise with us.
Thank you so much to you for the kind invitation.
Well, thank you for having us.
Thank you to both of you. Goodbye.
Goodbye.